What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. Fireside Giants, powered by BetUS. We all know what's happening tomorrow, right, guys? Cut day. Final rosters getting trimmed from about 90 men all the way down to 53 men. The Giants actually already started. They're not at 90 men anymore. They cut 10 players the other day. Yesterday afternoon, released 10 players, put them on the waivers. Very interesting stuff. Not anyone super notable got released yesterday. I guess you could point to Marcus McKethan, a former 5th-round pick for the Giants on the offensive line. He did get released. Ayura Sante, who had that fumble in the last preseason game on kickoff. There were a few names that you guys are probably familiar with who got released, but nothing truly standing out. Now, tomorrow, once that deadline hits, some standout names are going to get cut. But not just on the New York Giants roster, across the NFL. A lot of teams have tough decisions to make, and they're going to release some talented players and put them on the waiver wire. And for the New York Giants, who are 6th in waiver wire claim priority, they might have an opportunity here to pick up some pretty serious talent. But where should they be picking up that talent? What are the spots on this roster that could realistically be filled, at least in a depth capacity, through the waiver wire? That's what we want to dive into and discuss in this episode. But before we do, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And when you're looking at this Giants team on the waiver wire, 6th in the priority, you know that they've got some holes to fill. Where could they realistically target to add some talent on the waiver wire?
Well, as you mentioned, cuts are starting tonight and into tomorrow, so it's going to be a lot of roster turnover and waiver claims, free agency, and maybe even some backdoor deals will be executed to enhance this roster. And, first and foremost, what we saw against the Jets opened my eyes a bit at some key positions, notably the offensive line depth. I think the starting team, solid. Love Jermaine Illuminor. That's my guy for months now. Andrew Thomas is a stud. The jury is certainly still out on John Michael Schmitz. I don't think he's anywhere close to being a bust. It's way too early to make that determination, but he does need to get better. He does need to step up, and most of all, he got to stay healthy, man. You can't ever take steps forward if you're not healthy on the field and available. So that is a priority for JMS. John Runyon also returning from that shoulder injury. He should be ready to go for week 1. Above average left guard. I think that's going to be a really nice duo with him and Andrew Thomas. And of course, at right guard, you have Greg Van Roten, who had a career season with Carmen Brasillo this past year with the Las Vegas Raiders alongside Illuminor. So they already have that duo, that chemistry there, that synergy, which is going to be very, very useful this upcoming season. But in a perfect world, a guy like Greg Van Roten is a key depth piece, not a starter. And that's where you see the Giants' weaknesses, right? Like, their depth is very much up in the air. Now, Kubas, I think he'll make the roster. He also picked up an injury. He looked good in limited action. The tackle position, though, Anthony, is a wreck. It's a wreck. Like, behind Illuminor and Andrew Thomas, it is a complete liability. If either of those two guys go down for whatever reason, knock on wood, it's going to be a very, very unfortunate situation for the Giants. We're going to see a lot of what we saw last year. Evan Neal's nowhere close to being ready to be able to go up against starters. I mean, he went up against third stringers, and, even if he won 50% of his snaps, he gave up, let's say, the stats say he gave up one sack over 21 pressures or whatever, or 21 snaps. If you extrapolate that over the course of a full game against starters, 1 sack over 20 pass blocking reps against third stringers, maybe you're looking at 2 sacks in 20 reps. And if you extrapolate over the full game, you're looking at 60 snaps. He's giving up like 5 sacks a game. You know what I mean? Like, of course, we hope he gets better. We hope that things progress. He compounds good days. Be rolled up on that ankle, kind of, get locked up again. Not ideal, but it looks like he's okay. I just don't have any faith from him right now. I don't have any faith in him until proven otherwise. I think most people are in the same boat as I am. He should be cross-training at guard, preparing for a potential move there. I don't trust Evan Neal to be put in a game and actually hold his own. With that being said, Anthony, I am on board to go out and bring back Tyree Phillips. He's been working back from a quad injury he suffered in week 17, has always been a competent pass protector for this Giants team. Run blocking, not his forte, but pass protection, much better there. He's a backup for a reason. He's a veteran minimum guy. He's going to cost you next to nothing, right? A lot of these guys that are about to be cut, veteran minimum contracts that aren't guaranteed. So you can basically just replace that with a guy that has multiple years of experience, knows what it's like to play in MetLife for the Giants. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. What are your thoughts there in terms of offensive line support? I do think a waiver wire claim will be in the works for this team, especially on the offensive line. If not a couple like veterans, like experienced veterans, I think there's going to be some turnover. But Tyree Jackson is a guy I could see. It makes a lot of sense for the Giants. Familiarity, experience, cheap, and coming back from injury, solid player, good teammate as well. I think that is someone that, could be a good fit for this team.
I think you said Tyree Jackson. I think you meant Tyree Phillips, formerly starting with the New York Giants
yes.
for a few games. Yeah, Phillips is a player. I actually just wrote about him recently for the Giants on our website. He is a guy that has started really solid games for Big Blue. Like, he's played pretty good football for the New York Giants. Honestly, you could argue that when he made those starts for the Giants in place of Evan Neal, he was better than Evan Neal. And I know that's a pretty low bar to jump, but even still, Evan Neal being one of these guys that I don't think the Giants can rely on right now as a right tackle. And so for that position alone, now again, we'll have the conversations about should Neal be moved inside to guard? Is he going to perform better there? This, that, and the other. But for Tyree Phillips, as a pure tackle, swing tackle, and right tackle, I think he makes a lot of sense. I would absolutely bring him in. Veteran minimum contract. It's going to cost next to nothing to sign this kid, and he's still a decent player. Yes, he's coming off of that quad injury, but he's been practicing. Teams around the NFL are interested, and I think that familiarity could be a selling point to Tyree Phillips, and also the ability to work under a new offensive line coach who's had great success with underutilized talent in the past. Tyree Phillips makes a ton of sense, but I will say, Alex, I don't think, this might surprise you, maybe it's a hot take, I don't think the Giants need to do a lot of work on their offensive line on the waiver wire. I don't think that they need to put many claims in. I know that they don't have the greatest depth and talent all over this team, but they do have some players that they like, and they have a lot of players that they've loaded up on all offseason, like Aaron Stinney is still on this team. You know, you've still got, obviously, Greg Van Roten's going to start. Jalen Mayfield has been with this team for some time, and they like him. Schlottman has been with the team throughout the summer, and they like him as well. And obviously, Evan Neal is playing in a backup role, and Josh Azidu, I doubt, is going anywhere. So you have a few decent backup players here. I think that there's other positions that the Giants need to prioritize instead, because the problem here, and the reason why I'm saying maybe avoid the offensive line, is if you bring in a couple offensive linemen on the waiver wire, for example, you have to cut a couple offensive linemen in their place. So now you've got guys with familiarity going out of the door, and you have guys who have never played with this team or with this coaching staff before coming inside the building. And that kind of disrupts some things. I get that Josh Azido hasn't been good this summer, but he spent the entire last 3 years coached under this coaching staff. Releasing him and then bringing in an outside guy who has no idea how Dable runs his meetings or how Carmen Bricillo does things, you're obviously going to have a hiccup. So I actually think the Giants are fine on their depth on the offensive line. Again, it's not a ton of talent. It's not anything to write home about. 1 or 2 moves here or there might be enough to solidify the depth. And again, I like Tyree Phillips because of that familiarity, but I wouldn't do too much overturning on this offensive line. I think the Giants need to stick with who they have that's familiar to them to make sure that they keep that continuity that they built all spring and all summer long under Carmen Bricillo. But honestly, the same cannot be said about cornerback, Alex. I think that cornerback is a position where the Giants came into the summer. They had very high hopes. They were hoping and praying that one of their young guys would emerge, establish themselves as a starter. It just didn't happen. Cordell Flatt was the guy they wanted to do that. They really wanted him to step up and be a CB2. He got hurt. And honestly, that's been a problem for him throughout his career. He got hurt. He didn't play well when he was healthy. Nick McLeod got hurt. He didn't play all that great when he was healthy. He had some good moments, but he didn't play consistently well. So now what are the Giants going to do at cornerback? I think if there is any position that they are going to find a quality spot starter or even week 1 starter on the waiver wire, it's going to be at cornerback. There are a lot of teams who have excess cornerback talent. They're going to make some cuts. Some high upside young players might shake free on the waiver wire. Alex, I think that's the number 1 priority for this team is upgrading at CB2. I imagine you agree, but what are your thoughts on the Giants' ability to do so on the waiver wire?
I mean, they have to. They have the 6th waiver wire pick. The secondary is in shambles. The free agency, like, the options are slim. It's like a Dory Jackson. Like, the price is going to be expensive because of how slim the options are. Akello Witherspoon's another one. Like, it's just not looking like you're going to get a premier starter. But again, the Giants aren't looking for one. They're looking for a guy that can compete and be a long-term CB2. And they're looking for probably a developmental piece. The problem is Cordell Flatt has not played in like 2 weeks, and they cannot trust him. The injury concerns, the fact he has essentially 0 experience at boundary in the NFL is problematic in of itself. You got toasted by Malik Neighbors all offseason leading up to the quad injury. And Nick McLeod, yeah, like he's had moments. He's shown flashes, but is he supposed to be our CB2? I really think that that's optimistic. I think that if he gets hurt or something happens to him, you're back to square one. And truth be told, I think he's more of a CB3. I think he's a good backup. I think that's what he is. I don't think that he is good enough to be our CB2. I don't think he's good enough to be a starting player on a good team. And the fact of the matter is the Giants, we don't know what they're going to be, a good team, bad team, average team, who knows. But if they want to be a good team, Nick McCott's probably not starting in the secondary, unfortunately. And I think that probably leads us to the waiver wire where the Giants are going to have to claim at least somebody with some experience, somebody that can step up. I mean, they got a Jason Pinnock 2 years ago from the Jets, and he ended up becoming a starter for us. Who's to say it can't happen again? I like Trey Hawkins. I think he's a good projectable player, but he's far from being a competent starter at the NFL level, right? He still needs a ton of development, and he may never get there, but we'll leave it open. We'll see what happens if his name gets called at some point. But with that 6th waiver wire selection, it's got secondary written all over. You mentioned not really changing too much of the offensive line, and I totally understand that. I'm not. It's not going to be my priority in the waiver wire. It's going to be more of like an afterthought. It's more of like my 3rd priority. I think that I'd probably say my 2nd priority. Even linebacker could be an option now because we are really thin there. Obviously Micah McFadden, we don't know if he's going to be back for week 1. The hope is that he is. Deontay Johnson's still in a walking boot. KJ Cloyd looked good, but he's an undrafted player out of Miami. He's not experienced. This team could use some more linebacker depth. They have Matthew Adams, who's okay, but he's not that fast and he's terrible in coverage. So, what do we do there if you're the Giants? Maybe you want to go out and find somebody on the waiver wire that has some experience. Who knows? Maybe the Jets end up cutting Chaz Surratt. Who knows if what they do there, they may keep him. I don't know. Just throwing his name out there because I was looking at their roster, their depth chart. Anthony, you may have a better idea of if he's actually on the waiver wire there, or if he's on the bubble of that roster. So, at this point in time, I think the Giants could use some linebacker support, 100% use secondary support, could use some offensive line depth if there's a good projectable player that gets caught and, is out there for the taking, and maybe even some defensive tackle support. It's not my priority, defensive tackle. I think Jordan Riley and Elijah Chapman are fine. I think that Ryder Anderson lands back on the practice squad, and I think, they have Raheem Nunez-Roche as well. So, defensive tackle is not my priority of the bunch, but, I know I think you had a differing perspective on that in terms of defensive tackle. You thought that maybe they could use a bit more support.
Yeah, I still think they could add some support there. I do really like Elijah Chapman. I think that it's a great story. It's an incredible story. He obviously was an undrafted player, undersized. Nobody was really counting on him. He ends up winning a starting job. Doesn't even have to play in the final preseason game. Hats off to you. All that hustle, all that hard work. Awesome stuff. Very excited for him. I think he's going to be a starter on this team in week 1. But behind him, I still have my question marks. Alex, I know you really like Jordan Riley. Jordan Riley has not been on the field much for one reason or another. I think that he's fine as a rotational run defender. Rotational run defenders don't play a whole lot and usually don't really make NFL rosters and instead get stashed on practice squads. I think that the Giants could realistically, on the waiver wire, find a starting quality talent at defensive tackle. And a lot gets made about how great of an edge rushing room the Giants have, how good their pass rush looks on paper. But again, still, on the defensive line, I like Chapman. Are we banking on this undrafted rookie carrying out his success from the preseason throughout the regular season? Or would we like to have some insurance behind him and some depth behind him? I would like some insurance and depth. I would like to have some players behind him who have potential to maybe even be better than Chapman, or at least be equally as good as Chapman as an undrafted rookie. So I just think that there's room to grow there. You think about Jordan Riley, you think about Raheem Nunez-Roche, you think about Elijah Chapman. These are some decent guys. None of them are bona fide starters across the NFL. And the Giants might be able to get lucky here, see who gets cut on the roster, and find a fringe starter somewhere on the waiver wire. So I would like to bring in some talent. The number one guy that I am hoping and praying somehow shakes free is Leonard Taylor III with the New York Jets right now. The undrafted rookie, we talked about him yesterday. He really should have been a draft pick. There was at one point where his draft stock was as high as being a top 100 player in last year's draft. It plummeted after a disappointing season, but the talent is clearly still there. I don't think he gets cut by the Jets. I think that the Giants and Jets could work something out, though. Maybe a late round pick swap. That's totally possible. And I think that's ultimately how the Giants end up making an upgrade tomorrow. If you remember, Alex, last year, Boogie Basham Jr., they end up making a late round pick swap. They trade for him. They added some quality edge depth. I think that Joe Schoen recognizes the value in flipping late round picks to add depth. Not necessarily starting level talent, but I do think they will make a move to add depth either on the interior of the defensive line or in the secondary at cornerback, like we mentioned. Because right now, Alex, the starting 22 for week 1 looks like it's mostly taken shape. But the only real question marks that we have are defensive tackle 2 alongside Dexter Lawrence and CP2. So I think the outlook is positive. We're starting to see this roster take shape, but getting ready for week 1, getting prepared for that, and trying to get the season off to a right start, the Giants do have a little bit of work to do to get ready for week 1.
They absolutely do have a lot of work to do before week 1, but at the same time, the Minnesota Vikings do as well. And as you mentioned earlier in the episode, in the introduction, sponsored by BetUS, want to take a look at a line for this week 1 matchup for the Giants and the Vikings. Obviously, going to be an interesting one without JJ McCarthy starting for that team. Now we have JJ McCarthy. So let's take a look at the odds there and what could be a good bet for that game. So interestingly, Anthony, the Giants are +1 at -110 in this game from BetUS. Obviously, it's kind of interesting because I feel like the Giants should have a lead in this one with Sam. I mean, it kind of feels like they believe Sam Darnold is better than Daniel Jones in this one for them to be leading. I mean, the Vikings have a bad secondary too. Is Justin Jefferson quarterback proof? I think that's a big question a lot of people are asking themselves, but I feel like +1 for the Giants feels good. The Vikings are not a very good team. They lost Daniel Hunter as well to the Houston Texans. They have a couple pieces. Jordan Addison has been injured recently. I don't necessarily think that they're a team that's going to be like really good this upcoming year. I think they were going to transition from Sam Darnold to JJ McCarthy. But now it's the Sam Darnold show, and he did not look that good when they called upon him for the 49ers last season. I think the Giants defense will put pressure on him. I think our edge rushers are really, really good. Dexter Lawrence is going to eat him up, and I think that he's going to make some mistakes. There might be an interception or two, or even a fumble in this one. I think that the Giants offense, if we could just score more than 20 points, I think we could win this. Like, as I said, Justin Jefferson, really good player. But at the end of the day, like, is Sam Darnold going to be able to maximize him, Anthony? What do you think? I think I would take +1, -110 for the Giants here.
I think it's a tough call, but at the end of the day, you're looking at this Giants team and where they upgraded this offseason and where maybe the Vikings downgraded. The Vikings clearly downgraded at quarterback. They lost Kirk Cousins. They go with Sam Darnold. Inexperience has been a bust for the Jets in the past and has bounced around as a backup for the Panthers and 49ers since then, right? So you don't have a ton of confidence in that quarterback room. The other thing to highlight with Sam Darnold, when he's struggled really badly in his NFL career, he has struggled under pressure. So again, look at where the Giants upgraded on the defensive line in their pass rushing unit. I think that you can expect some productivity out of Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, pushing the pocket, collapsing it on Sam Darnold, hopefully forcing some errant passes and some mistakes, and maybe causing some turnovers to go in the way of the Giants. The Giants defense, of course, tied for the most takeaways last regular season. So I think that there is a statistical edge for the Giants just based on Sam Darnold's inability to throw against pressure and the amount of pressure that the Giants are projected to apply to the quarterback this season. So I do think at that line, +1, I do like the New York Giants in week 1.
Me too. I mean, I think I'll put 25 on this one. There's also there's some good lines here. I mean, I feel like the Jets and the 49ers, the Niners at -4 seems kind of, I know the Niners are a good team, but if they trade Brandon Ayuk, I feel like the Jets are really freaking good. Like, Sauce is going to lock down whoever he goes up against. And, Debo's fantastic, but the Jets defense is just something else. And their offense with Aaron Rodgers cannot be understated. I mean, the over at 44 seems really good. I mean, I think if anything, this is going to be a high scoring game, not a low scoring game. But, a lot of times teams do come out a little bit quiet, early season offensive struggles. But the Jets and Garrett Wilson are a really, really interesting team there. I think they're going to be really, really good. But for the most part, I do agree with you with the Giants at +1. Those defenses are just so bad. The Vikings and Giants defense in the secondary, I think that Neighbors is going to eat. I think that Justin Jefferson probably eats a bit. And over 41.5 points does also seem like a good bet at -110. Maybe I'll throw another 25 on that as well to maximize our earnings on that. So I'll walk away with like $50, a little bit less. But I think that's a really good option, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Thoughts about the odds for week 1. And obviously, we have the links to BetUS in our description and pinned comment. So if you want to sign up, you get 125% up to $2,000 on your first deposits there. So take advantage of that. We're going to be doing this all season long, making some money with you guys, especially tailing the Giants. Malik Neighbors, I think his receptions are going to be fun to kind of tail throughout the season. But as I mentioned before, make sure to go take advantage of that promotion. So come week 1, I do think that this team is going to look a bit different. I do think the depth on this team, notably, there are going to be a couple of new faces here. I wouldn't be surprised if we went anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 new players. I think that Joe Shane did say he wants to get this roster down to about 51, not 53. So they have a little bit extra room to work with as well. Obviously, they already made 10 cuts, including some guys they brought in to just kind of fill the preseason bodies, or like, the Joshua Kellys of the world, the Sutherlands of the world. There's some, low-key guys. I know Marcus McKethan was a surprise cut, obviously a former late-round draft pick from us in, I think, 2022. Never really got there, had some injury problems. It just didn't really work out for him. The development wasn't there. He's slower, not really agile enough. I think that Carmen Brasil likes a little bit more athleticism from his offensive line to be able to move, get into space. And McKethan was just slow as nails, dude. He was just slow as molasses. It was really bad in that regard. That was not his game. So I do think that Evan Neal has a similar problem, that he's really freaking slow, which is why guard makes a lot more sense to him, can pave the way in the run game, open up those blocks, open up those lanes, but use his anchor as more of a strength rather than being exposed for his lack of speed off the edge. So yeah, I think week 1 will be a lot different in terms of what the depth on this team looks like, but hopefully we can add some good pieces with some upside after waivers, and obviously there are still some free agents out there to consider as well.
No doubt, it's going to be really interesting. Like I always say, the final 53-man roster that you see on that deadline day is never the final 53-man roster. Like, that word final is used so loosely. That's their final 53-man roster, and then it probably changes about 48 hours later because they make some waiver wire claims or a trade, or they change their mind on somebody who shook free to their practice squad. It always happens. And essentially what you get is a 53-man roster that's different between now and the start of week 1, and vastly different from week 1 to week 17. That roster is fluid. It is constantly changing. But again, I think the Giants have made some interesting moves so far with the 10 releases that they've already done. And of course, we've got some more cuts on the way, and we'll see who they bring in. Obviously, they're sending players out. It's what they have to do. Got to cut the roster down. But who do they bring in to supplement those losses? How do they reshape this roster, get ready to get off to a strong start in week 1? And that's what's going to be a lot of fun to keep an eye on. And of course, we're going to be updating you guys on all of these roster moves, especially tomorrow afternoon once the deadline hits. We got you with all of that news covered right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one. And let's go Giants.
Perfect.